Okay, hello. Welcome to our Willamette Week conference room here. We are here for the Multnomah County District 1 endorsement interview for the general election. We have two candidates here today, Vadim Mazurski and Megan Moyer. How about we ask each of you to give us about a 2-minute statement, and then we'll go to our questions. And why don't we start with you, Megan?
Sure. Megan Moyer, I'm running for Multnomah County Commissioner because, like many of my neighbors, I've become really frustrated with what I feel has been an ineffective county government. There are three things that I'm focusing on my campaign. The first is to fix our broken mental health and addiction system. The second is to increase the number of families quickly that we're serving for Preschool for All so that more families are getting the financial relief that they need. And the third is moving people who are chronically homeless off the streets and into supportive housing. And I view this a lot like my career, which has been about building things. I've been a contractor, I've built housing, and I've been a policy advocate and expert. And both of those things are about how do you look at problems and build solutions. And that's really what I personally feel like the county needs, is to look at these really significant issues that are, multiple layers, but be able to approach it like you approach a complex project. If I'm building a clean room, it's about everything from electrical to plumbing to permitting to HVAC. It's multi-layered, but there is a method to the madness. There's a way to build systems and accountability and measure outcomes and be held accountable. And I really think that's what our county needs right now. And I feel like my background, both in the private sector of managing big projects and delivering, but also my experience in public policy, building systems of delivering care to our most vulnerable, is a combination that really could benefit the people of Multnomah County right now. And that's why, I'm a first-time candidate. I've never run before, but I felt really called in this moment to how can I help my neighbors? And this is why I'm running.
Okay, great. That was almost exactly 2 minutes. Have you been rehearsing? Okay, Vadim?
Well, thank you all very much for holding this interview. My name is Vadim Mazurski, as probably all of you all know, but some viewers don't. My family were refugees from the Ukraine. They came here when it was still part of the USSR. At that point in time, they allowed them to leave with just a few suitcases at $90 each. That was all we could take out. We came to the United States not knowing English, not speaking the language, not knowing how the systems work. We didn't know about any kind of federal aid we could receive. And we got by because people helped us. People gave us loans in order to buy our first car. People helped my father learn English. He took odd jobs. People helped him progress and get better jobs. We moved around a lot. And so I know what it's like to need help. I know what it's like to have very little money. I know what it's like to not know how governments and systems work. We have a lot of people in the streets right now that need help. And that's why I'm running for office, because I believe I have the background, the experience, and the hands-on work that it takes to know how to succeed. I'm running to stop the chaos. And I'm doing that in order to have a government that we could trust, a government that's accountable, and a government that actually listens to the people. I have worked with, obviously, a lot of people throughout Portland, including people that are working in the healthcare system, in the system that houses people. So whether it's Bybee Lakes or city teams, I've gone to those places. I've walked shelters with Keith Wilson. So when he talks about building places where people can be within 1 year in order to get them into treatment, I know he's done that work because I've walked along with him and talked to him about those things. And I think that's important. It's not about theories or ideas. It's about actually working on these things and knowing what the answers are and bringing the community together. And I have that experience. I worked for Medicare, so when it comes to healthcare law, I've been a part of that. I've been a senior advisor for the head of a Medicare agency. Now I work for Social Security, so I work as a judge for the Social Security Administration. I talk to a lot of people, and probably about 10% of them, I'd estimate, are people that live on the streets. And it's not just talking with them, because this is the first time they actually get to speak with the person. Usually I'm the third level appeal, so they get denied twice before they even come to me, and doctors take a look at their claim and they deny them, then this is the first time I get to talk to them. And I look at their medical records, I look at their counseling records, and I ask them questions, and we have a discussion. I have a very good, firm understanding of why people are on the streets, and that's what it takes, that lived experience of talking to people, of working together, of bringing communities together. If you look at my endorsements, it's a wide breadth of communities. It's business, it's unions, it's people that are out there doing the work, it's neighborhood associations. Working together is going to be the solution.
Superb. So I guess we'll follow the debate rules we had the other night. We'll go to you next on this question.
Sure.
We're a little more loosey-goosey around here, but the county has been sort of famously hostile to change agents because of the structure, because of the way the chair exerts control over that body. Just ask Sharon Myron about that. I mean, you can go to a meeting and watch her tear her hair out. And I think Julia Brim-Edwards is struggling a bit too. What in your experience and your abilities will help you navigate this really kind of tough body and get the change? We're talking about a lot of change here. How are you going to do it in this venue?
Okay, so I've actually overseen large bureaucracies. So whether it's being a senior policy advisor with Medicare or being a chief administrative judge with the Social Security Administration managing offices, I've worked in environments where we've had 3 unions competing for certain needs, as well as, and I was working in management. I did a good enough job, so when I stepped away from management, I was actually elected to the executive board of my union. So I worked my way up from being a shop steward to being a designated representative to being on the executive board representing 10 states in Seattle and Denver regions. And that teaches you how to work with different competing needs and different personalities. Being a judge helps with that as well. Sometimes these hearings become, people have a lot of pressure on them, and people act out, and you have to be that calm voice in a room, working with lawyers, working with claimants, working with experts. And then I talk to a lot of people. I go where people are to understand them. So during the social justice protests and riots that we had here in Portland, I worked in the Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, as well as the Citizen Review Committee. We had a meeting with about 300 people, many of whom were protesting out in the streets, talking to them, understanding their needs. We also spoke with the mayor about what the mayor could do, how he can relate to those needs, and what was on the table. On the Citizen Review Committee, hearing complaints against the police at the same time. Most recently, I was at Cooch Park when there were some protests there of people who live in that area because of the drug dealing that's kind of moved from downtown to that area. But I also talked to the P-pop people that brought the van out there to supply drug paraphernalia that the individuals there were against. I went from community to community to try to understand what their objections were. And it was a heated conversation. People were upset. People were yelling at one another, calling each other names. But when I spoke with them, it was through a measure of calm and understanding. And I think that's where we need to be, is understand where we need to get and listen to a lot of people and get to the commonality.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great. Megan?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things that I'm hoping to bring to the commission that will affect change. The first is that I do openly support changing the rules around agenda setting. I am a believer that public discourse and receiving input is actually going to lead to better policy. And so I would like to see that commissioner can get items on the agenda and the chair no longer has veto authority over agenda items. I applaud. I had a great conversation with Julia Brim-Edwards about 3 weeks ago, where she told me something that stuck with me, that she said, I have voted to have discussion on issues for Sharon that I don't even agree with her with, because I think it's important that these are public conversations. And I really thought about that and said, I commend that and I agree with that, because I think it is better to vet ideas and be willing to hear opposition and be willing to adjust policy before we move forward. I think that's actually been one of my criticisms of the county, is they seem to come up with plans at the chair level or at the director or administrative level, and they seem totally set in stone before they ever see the light of day. And I don't think that's served the county well. I think we've had ideas that weren't fully vetted, that didn't have accountability baked in.
Do you have an example there, maybe?
Well, I just fundamentally don't agree with how we have approached homelessness. Okay. I think it really lacks a clear, accountable vision. And so I want to be the kind of commissioner who, I'm not a yes vote or a no vote for anything. I'm not in a camp. I am somebody who really wants great policy and programs, and I want accountability for voters. I think that is a theme that I've heard on the doors is, hey, I voted for XYZ tax and I'm feeling it now. Where did my money go? To me, that's unacceptable.
Let's come back. I want to ask you both about this. So let's go to homelessness, because I think it's the biggest issue here. Tell me more about where do they fall down on homelessness, and specifically, what would you do differently?
Yeah, I think we've approached homelessness too much as a monolith and not breaking it up by individual communities and creating tailored strategies for those communities. The one area I think the county can point to as success, I also think it's probably the lowest hanging fruit, was rental assistance. But even within the rental assistance program, which a tremendous amount of funds has gone to, we have 5 different rental assistance programs at the county, of which we don't know if somebody signed up for 3. We don't know how, we're not measuring outcomes the same. We're not able to look at it and say, we clearly delivered XYZ for this amount of money. I also think we're very interested in looking at an immediate outcome and saying success, and not measuring where were they in 6 months, where were they in a year, where were they in 2 years.
So do you combine all those, or how do you unbalkanize that?
Yeah, I think it has to be in one tracking system. And I think it has to have some consistent policies. Is it going to be different how you run a housing assistance program for somebody who is facing eviction versus somebody who needs a down payment, a senior versus somebody with a developmental disability? We need a certain level of flexibility per community, but that doesn't mean we aren't tracking it all in the same database. We're not making sure we don't have duplication. Honestly, I'm a big believer in go to the people who do the work and find out. I've had lunch twice with Margot after the primary, and I said, tell me about preschool for all. Tell me about what's going on in housing. I don't have that insight, but there's somebody who's literally looking at it, who's willing to say, we could be doing this differently. We could be doing that differently. And I do think accountability is lacking as a core value in the county's operation. So that's something I want to bring to the table. That's going to be something, as every budget line item is brought forward, every investment, every policy program. How are we measuring success? What do we do if we're not living up to it? And is this the most effective use of these resources?
So that sounds like, I hear Julia and Sharon say that over and over,
sure.
And they just only have 2 votes,
Yeah. And they have rules that I don't think allow them that. I think one of the things that's kind of unique about my background, plus or minus, is that I have been an advocate for a very long time. I've worked in Salem, and I usually start a long session with a goal of, I'm going to pass 4 or 5 bills, which is pretty ambitious. That's a lot, but I work on a ton of issues, and you go in strategically about that. And my goal when I look at these bills is, I'm not married to my language. I am absolutely open to compromise to make progress. I will take 80%. If I can't get 100, I'll take 80. Absolutely, we move the goalpost forward. I'm okay with that. And I will ally with anyone who wants to fix this problem with me. Republican, Democrat, freshman legislator, seasoned committee chair. I am open to that. And so I'm known as a straight shooter. I'm known as somebody who knows a lot about the issues I work on, and I have a tremendous success record because I know how to approach the policymaking process, and I am not rigid in my thinking on how you approach that.
All right. So homelessness, the county's approach, what's wrong and what you do differently.
Okay, so the first thing is accountability. We don't have it. With the Revitalized Portland Coalition, we sent a letter to the chair saying, with 100 people signed, as some small business owners, some people that live throughout Portland, community leaders, asking for an audit of the Joint Office of Homeless Services. that is not being done. Now, Eco Northwest is kind of doing their own audit. It's going to take them about 3 years to do. They had to pull down the 990 forms for the nonprofit organizations to try to understand that, sign non-disclosure agreements. Once again, it's taking a long time, but we need to find out how the money is being spent and what's working.
3 years?
3 years, yeah. They're
Is this the
about 9 months
Pentagon? I
into it.
mean,
Exactly.
This
yeah.
is crazy.
It's crazy because the county's not partnering with them, so they have to do it externally. So they're pulling down the tax forms for the nonprofits. They contacted them individually and trying to find out what they're doing, what their successes are, and perhaps what their failures are. So accountability is the number one thing. We need to be able to understand what's working, what's not, and we have to work together. The Here Together Coalition flew an individual from Houston, Texas, that worked in Houston to make sure all the nonprofits there were working together and getting people into housing. What they learned was that there was a lot of repetition of services and also big gaps in services. And that individual brought people in the room and said, well, all of y'all are, several of you are bringing clothing to homeless individuals. One of y'all can now bring clothing, but one of you needs to address the mental health issues. So some nonprofits had to change what they were doing, but it created a streamlined effort to get people off the streets and into shelter. That individual Here Together flew here to Portland in order to talk about what their successes were, but our county is not capitalizing on that at all. No effort's been made to instill that here.
Interesting. So they're not trying to change the roles of the nonprofits to be more efficient.
Yeah, or even to reach out directly to nonprofits and make sure they're working together. Right now, we're basically shoving money out the door as fast as possible, hoping that people have success in solving it. Our government needs to be more involved in actually making sure that there's success out there, rather than what we read right now is success. We have 85% of the SHS money that we spent this year. That's not success. Success is fewer tents on the
Mission
street,
accomplished.
fewer deaths. Mission accomplished, exactly.
All right, I'll let my colleagues here.
So just a couple more
Yeah,
things.
after your-
And then we need a drop-off center, 2019. They closed down. We still haven't opened one up, even though Washington County has. Or Washington County has broken space in an 86-bed drop-off center, detox center. That allows people that are living in the streets to get to the services. We're not seeing outreach workers over there. Talk to Jessie Burke in Old Town, who has a frontline seat to what's happening there. She says in the 7 years she's been there, she's not seen one outreach worker walking around talking to people, trying to get them off the streets and into shelter. And then, we need transitional housing in a partnership between public and private foundations. I think there was an article today in the Willamette Week about Vanessa Sturgeon. She had a business that she was converting into transitional housing, detox transitional housing, and the county wouldn't partner with that. All they needed, I think, from the county was $7 or $8 million in order to have 80 beds altogether that they were building out. The facilities there, they just needed to convert it. And the county's not working with it. So we need to make sure that we're working to get that transitional housing so when people are ready, when they're getting treatment, that they are not back on the street as soon as they detox, they have a place to go.
That story which Anthony wrote about Vanessa had sort of an underlying subtext I'd like to get you guys to respond to. And the subtext was the feeling among a number of people in this town that you spoke to, that there's almost antipathy towards the private sector, that there's a belief that nonprofits ought to be providing these services, not for profit. And I'm just wondering if the two of you feel that that's actually inaccurate.
That feeling exists, or that they should or shouldn't?
Both.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I do think in some areas there is, and I happen to have a little bit different perspective. I don't mind if the quality and the outcomes are good. If they're for-profit, if they're non-profit. There have been quality issues with some for-profit providers in different areas, but I don't think that in and of itself makes somebody a good or bad provider. I've actually seen some really bad nonprofit providers. One of the things that Disability Rights Oregon does is we are the federally designated protection and advocacy organization, so we can go in to any facility in Oregon where a person with disabilities are, and I do a lot of policy work to make sure we're not lowering standards on abuse and neglect, which you would not believe the number of providers who don't want to be held accountable for safety, for staffing ratios, for, the facility being fire safe. Like, I spend a lot of my time saying, absolutely not. I know they put on a great sob story, but not all providers are quality providers. That's a fact. And so I am way more interested in their record of the quality of care that they provide and their outcomes than I am about profit or nonprofit. I definitely think there's that sense. I think there's a huge difference between hospitals owned by private equity or, a small, drug treatment company that decided to form as a C Corp or whatever and just does it that way. I mean, I'm much more interested in outcome.
Okay. Vadim?
So a few years ago, we might have been able to find solutions to these crises just through funding nonprofits to do the work. Unfortunately, we have not been keeping track of what's working, what's not. We talked about that a little bit. Right now, the hole is too deep. We need to have a public-private partnership. Washington County is doing that. When they're building out their transitional center, that is a public-private partnership. It's not just tax money that's going into that. Foundation money is going into it, a lot of different avenues. They didn't have to raise taxes one bit to do that. We need to do that kind of work here in Portland, Multnomah County, and we're not doing that. That sentiment is absolutely true. I certainly in this campaign you see it. I'm endorsed by a host of business organizations, some nonprofits that typically are not funded by the county, but most of the nonprofits, when they hear about me speaking about accountability, they seem to disagree with that, and my opponent is endorsed by almost a bunch of them, I guess, not all of them, but a bunch of them. And so what we need right now is that partnership where we can work together, because...
I'm sorry, do you believe you're not getting those endorsements because your opponent's not asking for accountability?
I believe
That's what you implied.
I believe that me asking for accountability hurts my chances, because right now we have a bunch of silos and people who sometimes all funding streams come from the county. What we need is that accountability, and we need to work together. We need to find out what's working and what's not. And really, at this point in time, what will work is that public-private partnership. I'm hearing the exact same thing. The county is not asking businesses how they can help. Whether you call that antipathy or not, I'm not sure. But there is a reluctance. And so that's the path forward, is making sure that we have the buy-in of people that have empty office buildings where we can put people in there, that we have the buy-in of people that can actually spend money, like Bybee Lakes. Why was there such an antipathy for Bybee Lakes to be built out there? Right now, there's a pretty good success rate. Most recently, the county gave them, I believe, started 1.5 million, maybe a little bit more at the end of the day. But there was a gross antipathy because there was a business community privately funded that was starting that up. They have an 86% success rate in getting people off of drugs and into housing, and yet there's been a lot of antipathy behind that. There shouldn't be.
Have both of you gone on the record on whether you're supportive, as a general matter, of the job that JVP has done? Can we start with you?
Yeah, no, I gave her, you asked me a grade, I gave her a C.
Oh, okay, you've already done this.
No, not here though. At City Club.
Oh.
C and...
Most recently, I'll give her an F.
you went from D to F, I think.
Yeah, because of the secret meetings. We've had this conversation a little bit about what's happening in Buckman right now with the deflection center and how those meetings have been secret. But then when you look at public safety, which is on top of a lot of people's minds, we had this organization called the Local Public Safety Coordinating Council, where it was, used to be the mayor and the county chair were the co-chairs, but Ted Wheeler hasn't attended that meeting in quite a while, so it's the county commissioner. But it's a police chief, it's a sheriff, it's the DA, it's a lot of people that are on there that are voting members. But now there's a secret executive committee that was formed where it's close to the public, where I actually got an email about the first meeting I went there. I was the only outside person that attended that meeting.
Was this about deflection? Were these the deflection meetings or something else?
This is something else.
Okay.
This is how they set the long-term policy with judges about public safety. And again, you see that idea that we're going to make the agenda in secret, whether it's using the executive rule that the county commissioner, that the county chair has been using, or these meetings. Let's keep keep it out of the eye of the public, out of the eye of some of the voting members. And what's on the agenda controls the outcome, right? So let's not have the secrecy. And that's what brought her down to DNF, because I'm seeing the secrecy a lot.
So I think Commissioner Bruno was just talked about bringing a time, place, manner ordinance to the county, similar to the cities. I'd like to hear how both of you would feel about the county enacting a time, place, and manner ordinance.
I think the line that I've drawn is I absolutely believe that there are places that it is not appropriate and not acceptable for people to publicly camp.
Such as?
Such as in front of businesses, blocking people from being able to use sidewalks, you know, in public spaces in which it then impedes people's ability to access a library, access a park. And I think it's okay to sweep. Do I want to spend county resources, because the jail's run by the county, to process somebody to then just, you know, let them out either that day or a couple days later? No, that's pretty expensive. I'm not super supportive of jailing people, but that's not the same as saying, time to move on.
So you would be supportive of the time, place, and manner?
Yeah, but it's the enforcement mechanism that I think we're
So what's the stick? What's the stick, so to speak?
well, sweeping people, I don't think is a huge incentive to stay.
Okay.
You know, I would like to give a little heads up so people can pack up and leave, but like
the city,
that's minute.
like the city does with the green signs posting. Yeah.
I mean, morally sweeping is a status quo. I mean, not morally, sweeping is a status quo, right? I mean, that's what we're doing right now. We're not getting good results. The mayor has said that when they do the sweeps, they offer people shelter, sometimes motel rooms. Now we have low barrier, high barrier, congregate shelter. We have safe rest villages. We have top sites. We have a lot of places for people to go. But still, according to our own mayor, 75 to 80% of people, maybe drug addiction, maybe mental illness. There's a host of possible reasons, but they don't go to those places. And so the time, place, manner ordinance has all 5 city council members have voted in favor of that for the city. And now it's coming before the county. So certainly I support it. But because we need that carrot and stick approach, nobody wants to put people in jail. That's not the point. The point is to get them into services, into a shelter where we can get them into housing wait lists and into services. Now my opponent seemingly has changed the story, because back at the City Club debate and in the K2 debate that we had previous to that, she said she's morally opposed to a CIDLI ordinance. Right now she's okay with that.
No, I said I'm morally opposed to jailing people. That's totally different.
And so that's one aspect of it. But you know, what do we do to get people into those services, into housing? Because that's where we get them into drug addiction treatment, mental illness treatment, medications, physical health treatment. So we need to ensure that happens. 67% of Portlanders supported the CIDLI ordinance, even without a place to go. Now, our ordinance right now is with a place to go. So you're offered congregate shelter, safe rest village, maybe even a motel room, if they're available, if there's space. And still, if you refuse, what do? Push them to the next street corner? That's not the answer. Those people are making bad decisions for themselves. We need to help them make good decisions.
So you help them by putting them in jail?
No, you help them with the threat of putting them in jail. And sometimes, yeah, you have to show that you mean it. Now, we're not putting 6,000 people in jail. That's never going to happen. But we have to have some consequences. Just like with the drug laws, House Bill 4002. Eventually, for using drugs, you can go to jail. But that's not the point. Nobody wants to put people who are using fentanyl in the streets in jail. But it's a leverage to get people into treatment. Now, and the end result is if you keep refusing, you might end up in jail. Not for very long, you'll be out. But nonetheless, that's the carrot and the stick. And we don't have a lot of sticks right now. We need to figure out a way in order to get people into the treatment.
So could you both talk about your thoughts on civil commitment? I know that's been a huge issue for DRO, and of course the county is very involved in civil commitment as well. So why don't you go first?
Yeah. So the county has about 250 people that can civilly commit an individual. Right now, our statute has been interpreted by the courts to mean that you have to be an imminent threat to yourself or somebody else. So basically, that's been interpreted to mean you have to be hurting yourself or in the midst of hurting somebody else. So even if you're walking around with a machete or these sort of stories that we hear out there, that's not enough to get you committed. Even if you're sleeping naked on the streets, as we see sometimes. There was an individual in Old Town that was sleeping naked, and people tried to get her help, and they wouldn't. It wasn't until Dan from a bar over there reached out to her, was able to find her relative's phone number, that they were able to contact the relatives. The relatives came, put a temporary hold on her, and then were able to get her home and helped her. That's a failure in our city and our county, because we need to get people off the streets, get them temporarily seen by a psychiatrist, counselor, get them medications, and the medications often do work.
So in order to get to where you want to get to, we have to change the civil commitment law? Or?
Yes. So I'm in favor of what NAMI is proposing. I've spoken with Chris Bonoff. You all have written about it as well, and I think there was a juxtaposition between what NAMI is proposing as well as what this Disability Rights Oregon is opposing to. There's a CTC work group right now where there's judges, legislatures, and a bunch of community organizations, including the National Alliance for Mental Illness, and including Disability Rights Oregon. And they have these graphs of how many people agree that we need to have a civil commitment statute that's more in tune with our needs right now and the needs of the people living on the streets and having mental crises. And so what you see is a lot of organizations are like, well, maybe for someone that's has a serious mental illness, or someone that perhaps has other challenges, there's several different ways where people are either more likely or less likely to vote for having a civil commitment. Disability Rights Oregon is 90% to 100% against all those.
Well, let's let her speak for herself.
Thank you. One, I'm going to answer for me, not for Disability Rights Oregon, because, I am my own person, I'm my own candidate. And, I have a lot of experience in this area. And I wish that I could say, I thought, if we just expand civil commitments, it's going to be the thing that makes the difference. I don't actually think that, and I don't think that for a couple of reasons. One is mental illness is a chronic disease. It's not just an emergency situation. So when somebody has a chronic disease like heart disease and they have a heart attack, do they need to go to an emergency room and be treated? Yes. And then when they're stable, they're discharged. And if you're getting good care, you're going to have follow-up with a primary care physician. You probably have a cardiologist. You're put on medication. You may have to have lifestyle changes. You build around, and your whole goal is to stay healthy. If all we ever offered in mental health, like heart disease, was if you have a heart attack, okay, we'll stop the heart attack. And then bye. And then you're going to come back a year later, and we'll treat your heart attack. Ooh, now we've got some damage. Now we're not as healthy. You will deteriorate, and you will eventually die. And that is what we do in Oregon for mental health. All we offer is hospitalization. And it does what it's supposed to do. When you are in a crisis, it provides minimal stabilization. And then you're discharged. That's what it is. It's a hospital. And it's not going to keep people stable. And it's not going to be able to prevent future hospitalizations. And I think people misunderstand what stable means medically. It means you're no longer an imminent threat. But it doesn't mean you can take care of yourself. In fact, 40 to 50% of people who are civilly committed are discharged unable to take care of themselves. I don't think longer in a hospital is going to fix that. But the truth is, Medicaid won't pay for hospitalization. So when I think about I've been fighting for years for more money for behavioral health, particularly community-based behavioral health. We have gotten investments. The Health Authority have done an absolutely horrible job investing, and I don't know if I can get a bunch more money.
Wait, you've gotten investments from?
The Oregon Legislature.
Okay.
$180 million specifically given to build out community capacity. The Health Authority can't tell us where $57 million of that is. Doesn't know.
Literally?
Yeah, literally.
There's an auditor who said, hey, this is...
They said it in the legislative committee. I mean, it's mind-blowing. I think it's more. But The reality is, I don't think there's a lot of money coming. I don't think we're going to get new money. So what can we do to make the best investments with the money we do have? And I keep telling people, listen, there are things that we can be doing to prevent people from ever reaching a level where they need to be hospitalized. There are things we can do if they are hospitalized to then put them in long-term supportive services through Medicaid. All of that in which we will get a 3-to-1 federal match.
Give me an example of something that you can do right up front.
Sure.
This sounds like kind of short-circuiting your pain when you're.
No, that's totally
pain.
fine.
You know what I mean? I'm looking for that. What is the example?
So one of the things that we need to be doing is just greatly expanding a program that OHSU has called ESA. ESA is about early intervention, because the research says if you wrap services around somebody during their first psychosis, their lifelong commitment to care and being in treatment will add 30 years to their life and dramatically reduce future psychoses. That is not standard practice. We're not doing that every time somebody presents with their first psychosis.
What services are we wrapping there? Like, just give me, what's the list?
It's
Mental health,
everything.
drug.
Yeah, it's everything. It's sometimes, depending on their situation, it can be supportive housing. It is definitely counseling, both individual and group. It's teaching them techniques around, like, how do I identify what's going on? Some of it is like DBT, which is a type of therapy where you ask yourself questions like, is what I'm feeling or seeing real? And how do I check that?
What does this cost? Because I heard a staggering number the other day that to take care of somebody for a year who's got severe mental health issues or addiction issues can cost up to $470,000 a year.
Well, Oregon State Hospital is $500,000 a year, total state
where
dollars.
does this money come from?
Right.
I mean,
But if I'm doing community-based wraparound services where Medicaid's paying on a 3-to-1 ratio, Medicaid,
Yeah.
then we're talking, we're probably needing to put in $20,000.
Each. Okay.
Yeah, but compared to one hospitalization,
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure I understand. You would not be in favor of changing the language around civil commitment, is that correct?
we don't have any beds. Where would people go? I mean,
Please, answer the question.
There are parts of the NAMI legislation I'm totally fine with. I don't support, because frankly it's unconstitutional, the idea that we're going to civilly commit somebody because they may become a danger to themselves or others within 30 days. That's not a clinical...
But you're aware, you can walk on Broadway right now and see someone on fentanyl who's in the middle of the street, completely naked, scratching himself. It'd be pretty easy to make the argument that he's endangering himself.
Well, civil commitment doesn't include drug use in Oregon.
I'm just trying to determine, and I don't know, is there a state that has language that you're looking to that you can point to that says has tougher language and that passes your test for being constitutional?
It's not my test, it's the Supreme Court's test.
So when you speak with Chris Bonoff, he'll tell you that we have the highest standards because of how our courts have interpreted. They need better guidance.
The toughest standard.
That's not true.
And
Finish your thought and then let's...
Yeah, and so, there's things that we can do because, this is all about life and death, guys. We know that. Okay, 350 people have died on the streets, 26 in homicides. Mr. Brady was killed while going home to his kids in a Max because a person with mental illness, people knew about him, was on that train, heard voices, and stabbed him and killed him, so he never made it home to his family. People are dying in the streets and we're arguing whether we should let them stay on the streets. We need to do something different. We need to do something different, and people are proposing those things. It's in front of the legislature. There's good, meaning people that are working with people with mental illness. They're saying this will make a change. Let's give it an attempt. We can chew gum and walk at the same time. Yeah, we don't have enough places to put everybody if we needed to, but let's have that statute so we have the resources and we have the ability to put the highest need people into medical care where they can get help.
What did you were going to argue with?
Yeah, I wish I haven't had to do this, but I did have my employee look at every single state's civil commitment statutes, and Oregon is absolutely not the most restrictive. In fact, even groups that support greatly expanding civil commitments put us in the top third for permissible. Like, that's just not true. I'm going to be honest. I think it is a fine line that we should all care about between when the government restricts somebody's freedom, which is sometimes necessary. I've never said that I don't think people need to be civilly committed. But we're talking about confining somebody against their will, and I'm a civil libertarian. I think that we gotta be real careful about what that line is. And I don't think the line of maybe in 30 days you might become a danger to yourself or others. It was just literally the bill. That is the portion of the NAMI bill that I don't agree with. I agree with almost everything else, but that's not real. You can't guess. Maybe I'm going to be a danger to myself or others in 30 days. That's not something you can clinically determine.
So let me, I've been having a lot of conversations with people who work in county governments other than Multnomah County.
Mm-hmm.
And universally, they describe Multnomah County as a failed county. Now, again, maybe there's jealousy or competition because they work for county governments in Lane County or elsewhere. But they describe what you've been talking about. I believe Multnomah County is the only county in the state that has agreed to do a deflection program that doesn't have one up and running. You just saw the recent report that said that Multnomah County is the 98th metropolitan area in terms of job growth. You're aware that there are high net worth people who are leaving the county because of the high marginal tax rate. And you're obviously aware that Multnomah County and the state, particularly as it relates to the Oregon Health Authority, they can't even be in the same room and talk to each other. There is such...
Right, is there a question here?
Yes, sorry Nigel, he hates these kind of questions. Would you agree that if you compare Multnomah County to the rest of the state, county government appears to be failing?
Yeah, I think that's why I'm running, is because I am in total shock.
So it's also my understanding that there are more than 20 people in Oregon State Hospital who have been cleared, legally, medically cleared for weeks and in some cases
It's nearly
months.
60, it's not 20, it's 60.
And the county won't place them.
That's correct.
Is that the county's fault?
Well, they don't have full control. Those are people who are under the PSRB, the Psychiatric Security Review Board,
Mm-hmm.
which is basically parole board for people who've been found guilty except for insanity. And so when someone's been medically cleared, so they do not need a hospital level of care.
Mm-hmm.
The PSRB, the parole board, says, okay, this is the type of placement that will allow this person to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, they don't exist. We don't have enough. I mean, I think that there is no question that we do not have enough community-based mental health resources, both secure residential, there's a whole tier depending on what's the right setting. But yeah, I am in total shock. It's $500,000 a year for somebody to be in the state hospital, and we are taking up 50 plus beds for people who don't need a hospital level of care. That's unacceptable. And part of it is the county. What are we doing to build community capacity? I will say over the last 5 years, I have seen no progress at all.
You probably read the interview we did months ago with the head of psychiatry at OHSU.
It was a great article.
In which he basically said that the idea of giving to every county the responsibility of providing behavioral health care is a complete and utter failure.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So you'd give it back to OHA?
Not this OHA. Maybe of a different time. Here, I actually believe our coordinated care organizations should be, right now we carve out residential behavioral health. I think that is a mistake. And I'm actively talking to Rob Nose right now about what would it look like if CCOs took over the residential side of behavioral health care. It's not going to be easy. There's a lot of complexity to do that, but I actually think it would be hugely beneficial. The idea that we're going to really blend physical health care, the long-term care supports we need, hold the CCOs accountable for delivering it, I think it is failed for counties to be a deliverer of behavioral health care. It's in statute. That's what it is right now. I am very interested in how we can build a system, again, with the systems we have. I'm not against CCOs taking it over. I'm actively in a conversation about what that would look like, and I think we're going to see a bill in 2025.
What gives
from
us,
Roundhouse.
this company, just quickly, what gives the CCOs an edge here? Why would they do it better? Did you address that?
Well, one, I do believe coordinating care leads to better outcomes. But two, perversely, I think that they have a financial incentive to be efficient and pragmatic about where we place people, what the right setting is, how do we move people successfully through a system.
It's in their
financial
mandate,
interest.
yeah.
And I do think they want to find the least restrictive possible setting that someone's going to be successful.
Okay. What do you think of the CCO idea? Did you get your question answered? Okay.
Yeah, we need better coordination. And if my opponent were running for the legislature, I'd say you're hitting everything on the nail. The legislature needs to be coordinated better, make sure we have CCO coordination, county coordination. Sharon Myron has said that the county is doing a terrible job. I agree with that. There's lack of urgency, but we need the state to step up and actually coordinate better, like Massachusetts is doing, and some of those other places that are spending less money getting better outcomes. No question about that. That's a legislative issue. I think we need to advocate for that, and the county can do that. But what are the urgent needs right now? So when my opponent says she's shocked that there's not enough transitional housing beds, I mean, it reminds me of Casablanca, where the person's shocked about gambling going on there. We've known for years and years and years that there's not enough transitional beds. So when Sharon Myron's proposing buying a hotel to make transitional housing, I, with the Behavioral Task Force, had people testify to say that that's a good idea. Now, it didn't pass because there's not a sense of urgency at the county. We need 3 votes to change things and make things work. Vanessa Sturgeon's place, that's kind of a transitional place. It was both for drugs and mental illness, where people can have residential housing, where they wouldn't be back on the streets, fending for themselves and getting into drug addiction. Again, not founded. Where's that sense of urgency? We need to make sure that our county is acting quickly, and we need to make sure that we're advocating for things that long-term will help, which is better coordination on the part of our state and with the CCOs to get sure. Now, we can get Medicare money. Part of the recent changes in Medicaid is that when someone leaves an emergency room, the hospital can actually bill more money in order to coordinate care and have a plan for that individual. So link him up to a social worker, link her up to a social worker, and have a plan. And that now the hospital can actually bill for that. So nobody should leave an emergency room without a care plan. In November, the HSRN, there'll be a new legislation for Medicaid where they will actually help pay for housing. And we talk about wraparound services. That means a lot of different things for different folks. But Medicaid money is coming our way. We already have some, we have others, we're just not utilizing them well. We need to bring urgency.
Can I slow you down? So you guys know each other really well at this point. We'd like you to ask your opponent a question, the point of which is to draw a contrast that will be helpful as we make our decision about who to endorse. So it's got to be a question, it's got to be something they can answer. Vadim will ask you to ask first.
Okay. So in the initial stages of the ADA lawsuit, which helped people with disabilities use the sidewalk, I went to Disability Rights Oregon and I asked them to take that lawsuit because there were people that were testifying in city council saying that they were blind, they were unable to make it to the Center for the Blind because of tents or people passed out blocking their way, sometimes threatening them, those sort of things. I went to Disability Rights Oregon and I asked them to take that case and they refused. Looking back on how things have evolved, would Megan take that case today?
I'm not a lawyer, so no, because that's illegal. And I'm actually not on our legal team. I have no idea who got his email.
As a policy advisor, would you recommend that case?
No. I won't for a couple of reasons. The truth is, it does violate the ADA to have sidewalks blocked. And that's actually an issue that DRO has brought up with the city several times. But I did not like, and I continue to be highly skeptical of what actually motivated that lawsuit And I don't believe it was motivated by a deep desire to make life easier for people with disabilities. I believe it was motivated to find a way to use the ADA to sweep people from the streets who also have disabilities. You know, I think from my perspective, if your number one issue was we need to make Portland accessible on our sidewalks, then why were scooters not involved in that lawsuit? Why didn't we talk about how Amazon packages, when they're being delivered, get stacked up in the middle? That wasn't who funded it, that wasn't the motivation. You know, for Disability Rights Oregon, we don't engage in lawsuits that pit one group of disabilities against another. That's just not who we are, you know. I have no idea what happened to his email. You know, I don't know how many emails from administrative law judges.
Is the city better or worse for that lawsuit, after that lawsuit?
I feel it's of minimal impact, truthfully. Yeah, I don't know if I see a huge difference from that lawsuit.
Okay, your question of Vadim.
Yeah. You talk a lot about meeting with people, but you were talking about it's a time for action. Can you name specific accomplishments in Oregon that you can take responsibility for achieving that improve the lives of people here in Oregon?
Yeah, I sure can. So I was on the Portland Commission on Disability, and there's a Disability Awareness Month, ANDEAM, and I brought together a host of organizations, nonprofits, people that work in the area, and they said, and this was at City Hall, several of the commissioners gave a speech, including Nick Fish, and they brought together these organizations, and this is the first time those organizations have been together. Once again, this siloing thing, a lot of people are working separately. And those organizations afterwards, had connections. People with disabilities that arrived there had connections. City council people had connections.
And
with
you personally
individuals.
made those connections?
Yes, I organized that on behalf of the Portland Commission on Disability and sent out invitations to all the organizations.
And what did that change?
I mean, it's all part of an evolving process to get us there. I mean, the ADA lawsuit, if you want change, that's change. But this is about building.
Were you a lawyer on that case?
I mean, we can go back and forth on this, but you know that the reason that
you wrote an email?
The reason that you're saying that there's bad motives for that lawsuit is only because your organization refused to take it because of a conflict of interest, saying that everybody in the street is disabled, so we can't move them. If y'all had taken it, you wouldn't have to talk about this conflict of interest about developers or whomever funding it.
Can you be specific about what your role in the lawsuit that was filed was?
Yeah. So I was sitting at a budget meeting. I believe I was providing testimony on a budget matter, and there were 3 people with disabilities who were testifying. This was online on the Zoom, and they said, we live in Southeast Portland, we can't make it to the disability center down there because of this. So I called the CESC, the Central East Side Industrial, whatever that organization is that helps people. They work on cleaning the streets and things like that. Central East Side Industrial Council. So I spoke with their executive director, and I'm like, what's going on? Is this something that's happening? She's like, yeah, we get complaints about this all the time. People with disabilities, people without disabilities as well. So I'm like, well, this is an open and shut case. I spoke with an individual with the U.S. Justice Department to get their take on it, and they're like, yeah, we prosecute these cases all the time. We might actually join this case if somebody else files a lawsuit. And so I sent an email to Disability Rights Oregon, somebody that had worked with them before on the Portland Commission on Disability, and I said, this seems like a straightforward case. It's an ADA violation. Will y'all take that? They said no. So then another individual that I work with, we were co-chairs of an organization called Public Safety Action Coalition, which works with people that live in Central Portland, some organizations and some businesses, kind of a meeting place. Sometimes we'd have speakers, that sort of thing. That individual knew John DiLorenzo, and she took the case to John DiLorenzo, and John took that case.
Who was the co-chair of that took it to?
Dino Tiffany, I won't say her last name because this is recorded, but...
So is it your
Yeah.
contention that this is just a sham lawsuit for the benefit of business, or?
I think that's what motivated it. was developers and
But
business. That's who funded it.
And you said you don't think the outcome is significant. It didn't make anything better.
No, not significantly. I don't see a huge change.
But did it make anything better?
Yeah, I mean, it did. Right now, if you have a disability and someone is blocking your way to school, I mean, the stories we heard were horrific from individuals that were experiencing this. Now, when you report a campsite, you can actually say, I have a disability. Someone will call you, ensure that you actually do have a disability, and they will, within 24 hours, be out there, not sweeping. They actually try to move people into housing as part of that. But if they won't move, then then they sweep them.
Yeah. I'm going to just go back to my record because I think, I wrote an email, I connected to people. I'm not saying that isn't being involved, but I think that is a world of difference between what I've accomplished in my career, which I think really is what I would say, look what I've done. If you want to know what I'm going to do, please look at what I have done. Just recently I helped pass Senate Bill 819. I was the head advocate on that. I worked with Senator Gelsler-Bluen. That ended shortened school days for kids with disabilities who was being denied their right to a full education. That was a very hard bill to pass. Passed it.
Just out of curiosity, who didn't want that bill to pass?
I did.
No, who didn't? Who opposed it?
Oh, School Board Association.
Because
it was going to cost them money to educate these kids. I mean, that's a fact. I was able to end the use of a discriminatory scoring tool for the Oregon Health Plan that scored treatments for people with disabilities and chronic disease of lower value than treatments for otherwise healthy people, which meant when we cut the line, which we do in Oregon, treatments for people with disabilities wouldn't be covered. I ended that. It violated the ADA, passed that bill against some CCO complaints. I have been able to, I created the Office of the Residential Facilities Ombudsman to make sure that people who are in residential settings with disabilities had an ombudsman who would investigate abuse and neglect. I don't know why people think I'm this darling of providers. I've never worked for a provider. I work every day to hold them accountable and make sure that the people in their care are safe. I have successfully lobbied and then helped write our Medicaid long-term care plan, saving us hundreds of millions of dollars in a recession while ending wait lists to services for people with developmental disabilities. I have a track record of deep systemic change. And I think that's what we need right now in Multnomah County. I talk to people too. I'm endorsed by people too. Rob Nose endorsed me. And you know what he said to me? It's like, Megan, honestly, I'm endorsing you because you might be the only person I know who would run for office who knows more about Medicaid than I do. Which, we joke because when he brings together a work group, which he just did, that he called the Medicaid Salon, it's the head of Oregon Health Share.
Rob has done a lot of stuff.
Let me finish. Let me finish, please.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm in that room. I was the only person there representing clients who receive Medicaid. That's the level that we're talking about needing to be able to work and fix these problems.
Are tax rates in Multnomah County too?
Hold on, can we let?
It's been a long discussion here, so I appreciate it. So let me just say, I appreciate the work that Megan has done for Disability Rights Oregon and SEIU, for whom she worked beforehand. They've done a lot out there. They've had a lot of accomplishments. I agree 100%. My understanding of the question was, what have you personally done? I can take credit for working in the Affordable Care Plan that Obama passed. Okay, so I was in Medicare. I was working as a senior policy advisor. I would get those emails. We would have input. I would write that input on those things. I would never take credit for passing the Affordable Care Act, but I worked on that sort of stuff. So I appreciate that, my opponent has been a good employee for those organizations and doing a lot of good work out there, but I have yet to see her doing stuff for the community in her personal capacity that is outside of that job. So if we're talking about doing stuff, when I worked for,
I spent 8 years on the board of Oregon Tradeswomen. I was on the board of Basic Rights Oregon.
Yeah, so thank you. When I was on PCOD, the Portland Commission on Disability, that was my own time. That was not part of my work. When I was in the police oversight agencies, that was my own time. Right now, when I'm coordinating with 17 organizations on how we can make changes to address homelessness, that's on my own time. When I'm the president of the Coalition of Neighborhood Associations, and we're trying to figure out how we can help each other clean up trash, security issues, hold street fairs, and things like that. That's on my own time. So I wish I could take credit for everything I've done in Social Security or Medicare, but I'm taking a lot of credit for what I'm actually doing out there in my own time, and that will translate well on the county commission.
Okay, how much time we got? You want to?
We're out.
We're out.
Quick
Okay.
question, are tax rates too high in Multnomah County?
For middle class families, yes.
What are you gonna do about that?
Well, I openly supported Julia Brim Edwards wanting to index the preschool for all, and then I also support indexing the Metro housing bond.
Is it IP 17 or 19?
No.
Measure 180.
Is that the corporate?
No, yeah, the redistribution of income so that.
Yeah, I don't support that.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't support the redistribution. A week before Julie Brimett was brought on board, I had a tax plan that I think I emailed some of you all about, including indexing the SHS tax as well, because it's affecting more and more people that are middle class, as well as expanding preschool for all statewide, which would save money in this county as other states have done. Also decreasing a tax burden for housing for people that are disabled or 65 or older. That's all out there. But I want to
Yeah,
say
I
that
don't support giving
my
tax
opponent
rate to
took a
millionaires
pledge for Preschool for All, for Universal Preschool Now Coalition. She got a really nice endorsement from them and got on their email list. That pledge said, number 2, retaining the tax that was resoundingly approved by 2-to-1 margin of county voters. Number 3, rejecting any further delay in fully funding Preschool for All. Jessica Vega Peterson, when this option to index came up, said, hey, this is probably going to cost us tax money. This is probably going to have fewer. Did anybody go out there, did Julia Brim Edwards go out there and ask the county to assess whether we lose tax money in indexing? And Julie's like, well, I asked, but we never got a result. And Jessica Vega Peterson's like, well, let's put it off for a while until we figure out this. Okay, so it might cost us money. My opponent took this pledge. I spoke with these people. I said, I'm for Preschool for All. I think it's great for kids. It has good outcomes. I support it 100%. But I will not take a litmus test about this because I know that things can change over time. My opponent took this litmus test and then testified on something that our own chair says will probably cost us tax money. So I'm not sure how you square that circle.
Would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, I testified on Julia's proposal. I do support that. And what I said on the record was, and to be honest, I got some of this from my conversations with Margot. If we can still fully implement Preschool for All, then I support indexing it. Because I believe that we actually
Indexing
have.
doesn't preclude this pledge.
I believe I'm continuing my pledge to have a program that is fully funded, that will reach all preschool kids. And from my conversations, I feel comfortable saying that we can afford to index and still deliver. Now, I've also come out with a proposal on Preschool for All. It's on my website, where I think we need to start subsidizing families now. This approach of getting contracted slots, I think, is important in areas where we don't have enough care to expanding care. But there are families like me right now who I'm paying $1,800 a month.
So give the money to the families.
I'm lucky I found care. I know I'm lucky. But it is a real stretch for my family. And I'm not saying give it to me. I'm saying families just like me, why can't you subsidize what they're doing?
So the money wouldn't go to the provider?
Well, it will. The state runs something called employment-related daycare. Are you familiar with that? So basically, you sign up, you qualify, then you say, here's where my child is, and the payment goes.
Okay, so that's a little different.
Yeah, so you don't get taxed. It's not taxable income.
Yeah,
But
gotcha.
I'm saying, this is where I've decided my child is.
Yeah, okay. Are we doing a fun question?
Yeah.
Is that all that's left? So we're gonna, you're the first, so we're gonna beta test a couple here. How about that? This is beta testing. The one I like, because I came up with it, is what trait described by your astrological sign, accepting that all might be complete nonsense, actually describes you well?
So you want to know their astrological sign.
And then what trait?
Oh, yeah.
What trait
Are we both Libras?
really works?
Are we? Yeah, we're both Libras. Oh, that's
Wow,
funny.
okay, all right.
Well, I'm queer, so I love a good astrological sign.
All right. Libra.
Yeah, Libra is a scale, so you balance things, and I think that's kind of what my campaign is a lot about. You know, you have to figure out the different sides of an issue and see what's best, what works best for the most people. And you know, so I was in Sedona one time, and they did one of those aura readings, and they said, you know, based on that, I'd be a great salesman, which you know I don't know, but or a lawyer. And I think, you know, part
And that's
of
how
that,
you became a lawyer?
exactly. No, because of the water reading. You know, it's already there. But but that's, you know, that's kind of it. You know, that Libra, that's sort of seeing both sides of the issues and then understanding where that middle ground is where I come from a lot.
Interesting. All right. Megan?
Yeah, I think definitely this, you know, in pursuit of justice has been a hallmark of who I am and my career and who I fought for. You know, and for me, maybe it's because I'm close on the cusp of Scorpio. I got a little fiery side to me, but you know, I really have spent my career wanting to make sure that those most vulnerable, you know, those who work on the margins, those who are paid the least, get treated justly and fairly. And I think it drives a lot of who I am, because I believe that we can do better.
Okay. All right. I'm a Virgo, and my thing that drives me is that
We didn't have
I'm neurotic. Should we try should we do another fun question in case we need it?
Yeah, the high school question that Aaron suggested. I
Okay.
think.
Oh yeah. Hey, Aaron. Okay. Aaron? Ask the high school question.
He's on mute.
You're on mute.
Mute.
Yes, I know. I wasn't aware I was asking a question. What were you best known for in high school?
I was voted by my senior class for best sense of humor and most opinionated.
What high school?
Charles A. Sprague High School in Salem, Oregon.
Most opinionated. I didn't
Yeah.
know they awarded that.
Yeah. Which was funny because I hosted our senior awards. And got to give it to myself.
I was known as the worst soccer player on our varsity team. Our varsity team won the championship. I can't.
What high school?
Lee High School in Houston, first year actually. And I'm a terrible player, but I knew the coach, and somehow he got me on the team. He was my French teacher. It was a volunteer thing he did. And I was the only guy that never got 1 minute of play during any of that, but I was on that team because I thought I could do something, but apparently not.
Okay.
Nice.
All right.
Okay. Is that good?
Yes.
Okay. We have options. We'll see which one. Maybe we'll use both.
I
Thank you
think
both.
We're